Hi, I want to talk for a few moments about the topic God is trying to tell you something. In Romans, the 12th chapter, the first and second verse, it says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. One of my favorite movies is The Color Purple. I've read the book, I've seen the movie many times, but every time it's on, it seems like I'm watching it for the first time. But in that movie, there's a scene that really speaks to me about transformation. It starts off with Shug being in the juke joint singing on a Sunday morning. And while she's singing, she hears the choir singing from the church down the road, the little church where her father is the pastor. And that choir is singing a song. Some of the words are "Can't sleep at night," and you wonder why. Maybe God is trying to tell you something. Cried all night long, something's gone wrong. Maybe God is trying to tell you something. And so, as she's listening to this song, she stops singing and goes down that road, walks down that road to get to that little white church where her father is. And when she walks in the door, her father, whom she had been estranged from for many years, ends up embracing her. That's the first transformation you see, is a transformation with him. I don't know if it was a theological change, I don't know what it was, but something in him shifted and he was able to embrace his daughter. And then the next change that you see is in her, that while she's being embraced by her father, Shug has just so much joy on her face. She just looks so happy. And I would believe that that character would be feeling some level of relief, and some of the pain would be melting away, all those years of rejection. And then the third transformation that we see is with Mr. He's hearing the same song, and he's moved to the point that he makes a decision that it's been too long that he's been keeping Celie away from her sister Nettie. So he decides to use his money to go to the Department of Immigration and enable Nettie to come from Africa to be reunited with her sister here in the United States. Those are three major stories of transformation, critical stories of transformation, things that similar to things that some of us perhaps need to consider. What are we doing that's keeping us away from other people? What are we holding on? What stereotypes, or what embedded theology, or what traditions are we holding on that are separating us from really connecting with somebody else? Paul was talking about that sort of thing in the text that I read. He was living at a time when part of the Jewish community, uh, who were followers of the way, part of that community thought that to be a full part of that community, you needed to adhere to the laws, the laws that they find in the Torah. And Paul was saying, and then there was another faction of the Jews living in this area and at this time who felt like we could be included in the community of faith because of grace. That grace welcomes people of all different backgrounds. Grace welcomed the traditional Jewish community and this new thinking Jewish community, including Gentiles, that everybody could be together. Paul was saying that's why he's calling for the renewing of your mind and presenting your full body, not just changing part of yourself, but saying to these people, do a full transformation, heart, mind, soul, everything. Because when we just think we've transformed with our head, um, there's a lot of things that we can memorize and say we remember. There's a lot of things that can come out of our mouth, a lot of things that we can do that are politically correct when our hearts have really not been transformed. So he's saying we need to have a full transformation. That's a problem that we face sometimes, even in this country. We still have race issues that we need to deal with. And I think it's because people have not been fully transformed, that people know what's right, but don't do what's right because something inside of them is stopping them. I don't know if it's fear, hatred, some twisted view of who God is. I don't know what it is. But we have people who are still racist to the point that we see what happened to Ahmaud Arbery lately. A young man shot while he's just jogging through a neighborhood by some vigilantes whose hearts need to be transformed. Um, we have issues that we also need to be transformed from. It may not be something as severe as racism or anything like that, but it could be something like thoughts that we've been carrying about ourselves for years, insecurities, things that we think we have some level of shame about. We've been carrying things that we need to transform and change our thinking. It could be the way we relate to someone else, some grudge we've been hanging on to. It's time for us to be transformed in many ways. It's important to have people in your life, like a friend or a relative or someone that you trust, and you know that they'll speak to you, speak truth to you in love. I had that happen when I was a pastor. One of the officers came up to me after church and said, "Rev, you're a good pastor, but you're stubborn." And I heard her. I didn't deny it. I just said, let me see if there's any truth to it. And the more I examined myself, I saw that there was truth to what she said, but I hadn't seen it. There's a saying that you don't know what you don't know. So you need somebody to help you to recognize things that are going on in your life. I have 4 quick things I want to say about transformation. The first thing that I want to talk about is wake up and smell the coffee. We need to become aware that there's something in our life that we need to do. In his book, Awareness, The Perils and Opportunities of Reality, Anthony de Mello tells a story about a father and a son in Spain. And the father goes into the son's room on one morning and says, "Jamie, you need to get up. It's time to go to school." And Jamie says, "I don't want to get up." And then Papa says, "You have to get up." And Jamie says, I'm not going to get up. I don't want to go to school. And I have 3 reasons why not. First of all, school is dull. Then the kids tease me. And I just hate school. And his father goes to him and says, "Well, Jamie, you need to get up. And I'll give you 3 reasons. Number 1, it's your duty to go. Number 2, you're 45 years old. Number 3, you're the headmaster, or we would say the principal, and you need to be there." See, sometimes we need people to encourage us to do what we've been put in the world to do the things that we know are our reason for being in the world. And so Jamie needed to be pushed so he could make a transformation in his mind to the point where he feels more committed to what he was doing. We have other things that cause us to be transformed. It could be a loss. It could be a loss of relationship, loss of a loved one, loss of a job. It could be an illness that comes upon us that we really did not want. That gets me to our point number 2, and that is we need to have a will and a way. In the spring of 2000, I started having really strange things going on with my body. I didn't understand why I wasn't walking right or writing correctly or speaking correctly. I didn't understand what was going on. And I went to a doctor who did an MRI and realized that I have multiple sclerosis. And he showed me a scan of my brain and it was glowing. And then he showed me a brain that wasn't glowing. And I said, "I'm going to go from this glowing brain to this brain that's not glowing." And he said, "You can do that. It will go dormant, but the scars won't go away, but that you will get better if you do what you need to do." So I had the will and I needed to find the way in order to take care of myself. So I got a doctor who would help me. And even though I wasn't going to be the same as I was before the diagnosis, I still had a chance to have a good life if I learned how to manage my stress and learned how to eat right and rest and take my medication, follow the doctor's orders. If I learned to do all those things, I could still have a decent quality of life. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, just keep moving forward." The third thing is we need to learn how to control our own drawbridge. As I said, I needed to learn how to manage stress. Well, Henry Nouwen has this illustration of a drawbridge where we are a castle and we are the people who control the drawbridge that controls access to our castle. We control who comes into our life and when they leave. And we also control when we want to go across the moat and be with the people. And so, what we need to do is learn to pull up our drawbridge when it's necessary. Take some time to recharge. Take some time to meditate, pray. We used to talk about having a prayer closet. Take some time to read something that's inspirational. Do some yoga, some Tai Chi, or something that will rejuvenate you. Um, we all need to have that time. We can't let our lives become public property. So I encourage you to control your own drawbridge and maintain your boundaries and let people know your boundaries. And do know that when you pull up that drawbridge, people are still going to try to cross the moat and bang on the door. But you have to control your boundaries and make sure other people respect them and respect them yourself. The fourth and final thing I want to talk about is answering the phone. Paul was trying to say to people, individuals, that you need to be transformed. Transform yourself, transform your whole self. And the reason he wanted them to be transformed so they'd be a better member of the community. If you take one ingredient in a recipe for a cake and you take one ingredient that's spoiled, it will spoil the whole batch of what you made. That's what Paul was trying to say. We need people who are whole. We need people who are transformed, such when we come out into the community, we won't spoil the community. That when we're added to the community, it adds value. It's something that helps. It's something that is whole and healthy. So that's what he's trying to do, and that's what we need to do. We need to look at ourselves and see what needs to be transformed in us so that we can make a positive difference in our world. There was a song that they used to sing when I was little. Well, I should say we used to sing when I was little. And that song said, "When he calls me," he meaning God, but we know God is not a man. But the song says, "When he calls me, I will answer. I'll be somewhere listening for my name." Well, these days there's a lot of things that we can be called to. We know there are 30 million people who are unemployed in our country, more than that. We know because of that, we have millions of people who are food insecure and need to have some assistance. Perhaps we're in a position where we can donate to a food bank, or we can protect ourselves and go out and actually help and do some work. Or maybe it's to call somebody that we know is lonely. They don't have to be really close to you, but if you know somebody in your community or in your church or someone nearby that needs a little support or could use a little company, give them a phone call and touch base. Keep up with your family and with your friends and continue to be a positive force in your community. God is trying to tell us something, my friends. We've all been called to this time. God is trying to tell us that even though there's a lot of negative going on around us, and even though there's a lot of trouble, there is still a lot of good. And we're called to be light and love in our world. We're called to bring hope to the people around us. And so God is trying to tell us there's work for us to do. So I ask you, are you ready to be transformed and to bring your whole healthy self to the table to be a part of this loving community to help us work towards change? I believe God is calling us. I believe now is the time. I love you. Thank you for listening. Keep yourself safe. We'll talk soon.